Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Beach coming back to you today with a review of the STARRCADE, the Essential Collection DVD. Made a video about this, hyping this up the other day after WB announced that after, I guess you can say, the last one was in 2000, we're in 2017. A 17-year absence, STARRCADE is making its return to pay-per-view, this time being a WWE Network special for, I believe, the Monday Night Raw brand. They're going to be coming to you live from North Carolina, right there in Greensboro, where everything started back in the day. It's still going to be in the Greensboro Coliseum, where it all started back in 1983, with good old Harley Race and Ric Flair going at it right there in the middle of the ring. A Flair for the gold, STARRCADE 83. Because of the fact that I made the video hyping up the 3-disc set, saying this is something that honestly should be in everyone's collection, I went through and watched STARRCADE, the documentary, which honestly, the real negative that I gave it to in the Bobby Heenan review that I made earlier this week was the fact that it honestly was too short. I honestly think that the STARRCADE documentary was a little bit of a repeat, sort of getting back into a lot of the things that was covered in the Death of WCW documentary, which is honestly, in my mind, one of the top 5 documentaries that WWE's ever done, covering the life of the NWA as well as WCW until its death in the early 2000s. I still believe that this is a good documentary that you honestly should pick up. Starting off, going through all the history of the Crockett's, talking about the history of Thanksgiving wrestling, where, a lot of people or WWE fans will know that Survivor Series started off as a Thanksgiving tradition that happened on Thanksgiving Eve. Many people might not know that the reason why it started as a Thanksgiving Eve tradition is because STARRCADE was run the first few years on Thanksgiving. And the fact was that Dusty Rhodes put it out is that basically everybody works all day. They get done cooking their turkey. They get done eating. They're sitting around in their family room, and what are they going to do? These days, there's always good basketball games, or there's football on, but WCW and the NWA looked at it and says, hey, this is a way to get some money. We can get the people of North Carolina to all head down to Greensboro Coliseum, or we can get people to turn on what was the birth of pay-per-view wrestling with the whole closed circuit television, and we can get everybody to watch some wrestling and make some big money, putting on one of the biggest shows of the year. Vince basically was trying to find a way to sort of cut off the NWA, and they decided that they were going to start Survivor Series. They basically went to the cable companies and said, hey, you either have a choice. If you want to carry WrestleMania, you're going to carry the Survivor Series on pay-per-view, and you're not going to show STARRCADE, which is basically going to cut the nuts off of the NWA, where they basically had to stop their Thanksgiving tradition at STARRCADE 1988, where it was moved to a December pay-per-view, being the day after Christmas, which only lasted 1 year. I'm not sure if the people of Norfolk didn't enjoy going out to see wrestling, and maybe it was a bad gauge, or maybe it was bad pay-per-view numbers that made them move it earlier in December. But later days of WCW, STARRCADE got moved back to the days after Christmas. I don't think they run December 26th anymore, but it was in the days after, probably the first Sunday. I'm not sure what year pay-per-view started moving to there, but in here we basically have the discussion of STARRCADE being born. One of the first big matches on the STARRCADE 83, besides for the Harley Race versus Ric Flair match, is the dog collar match between Roddy Piper and Greg the Hammer Valentine, where basically, as being contracted by the NWA at the time, they were told to go out and have one hell of a match where they would beat the hell out of each other, find a way to build the stipulation that they could run the match over and over on the house show loop, where people will continuously want to see the match. Roddy Piper and Greg the Hammer Valentine both decided to have the dog collar match, and Piper talked about how as the dog collar match went on, basically they had to put some not padding, but a little bit of a buffer, like almost like a fur lace collar on the inside, because the way that it was just rubbing against their necks and killing them from doing the same match night after night after night. They talk a lot about the fact that STARRCADE was an early success from 83 into 87, with the whole things like the Night of the Skywalkers, and basically where they decided to actually move, much like WrestleMania 2, holding STARRCADE in 2 separate arenas, holding it in Greensboro as well as in Atlanta in the Omni, so you could double your gate as well as double your numbers of people watching the show. The Scaffold Match was a match that was held between the Road Warriors and the Midnight Express, I believe. On the same card, the Rock and Roll Express wrestled against the Andersons in a steel cage match. Honestly, in my mind, as far as NWA pay-per-views, NWA VHS tapes, or just best of NWA, possibly the Night of the STARRCADE 86, possibly one of the best nights of the NWA's history in my mind. I'm not sure. I know that Jim has the tape. He's shown it 1,000 times, and I'm sure that he's drooling over the fact that we're talking about STARRCADE right here on this video. But maybe he can do a video hyping up Night of the Skywalkers, because I believe that's possibly, in my mind, one of the best tapes the NWA ever put out. From there, we talked about moving out, the whole Vince versus the NWA, where basically they had to move out of the Thanksgiving slot because Vince holding the cable companies hostage. From there, we go to the beginning of WCW in 1991, which brought the start of Battle Bowl, which honestly, in my mind, as a kid, was a very good idea. But looking back at Battle Bowl now, that was held in 91 and 92, which I believed was basically the WCW roster being held out on a stage and then random drawings to put together into tag team matches. Then once you won your tag team match, you were added into a battle royal, which I believe was decided in a one-on-one match to decide who the winner of Battle Bowl was going to be. I believe Sting won the first Battle Bowl, and then I believe the Great Muta won Battle Bowl 92. They went back to doing some sort of a gimmick in 1995, which honestly is a very sort of confusing show to me, which was called the World Cup of Wrestling, which was WCW against the New Japan Pro Wrestling. The only part that doesn't make a lot of sense is they wanted to have their biggest stars wrestle in these matches, but at the same time, you have guys like Alex Wright, you have Chris Benoit, and Johnny B. Bad wrestling, as well as Eddie Guerrero. And I know people are probably up in arms that I would talk bad about Eddie and Chris, but at 1995, they weren't the biggest names, like Randy Savage and Sting. And to expose this fact is that, basically, Sting and Luger, who wrestled inside of this tournament, the best of 7, once their match was done, had to go out and have a triple threat match to be claimed the #1 contender, which was won by Ric Flair. Ric Flair didn't have a match earlier in the night, even though basically Luger and Sting were fighting for the pride of WCW against New Japan Pro Wrestling. That possibly hurt them on their quest to becoming the #1 contender, to go after the title, and Flair ended up winning a match to become world champion later in the night by beating Randy Savage, who also wrestled in the tournament as well. So it possibly would have been good if it just would have been that, but if they wanted to have the title match and the #1 contender match at another time, that probably would have made STARRCADE a little bit better, make a little bit more sense to me. They put over the fact that Ric Flair was the biggest star of STARRCADE. Well, Ric Flair was the biggest star of WCW, so that's just the easiest thing to do. They basically end off the DVD by saying that Goldberg's impact into creating attention for STARRCADE in the later days, which I immediately just pulled out the bullshit card. I believe Goldberg only wrestled on the last 3 STARRCADEs. STARRCADE 98, he was the main event going in against Kevin Nash, your World War III winner. Basically, he lost that match. He was the main event. You go to STARRCADE 99, where he wrestled in the main event again, which I believe was the payoff of the WCW World Heavyweight Championship tournament. Lost that match to Bret Hart, so now basically he's 0-2. And then we had at STARRCADE 2000, Goldberg wrestling in not even the main event in a match against Lex Luger. The main event of STARRCADE 2000 was Scott Steiner, who was the man of WCW 2000 as well as the dying days of 2001, going up against Sid Vicious for the World Heavyweight Championship. So, I don't know. Good DVD. Possibly if you're like the last man on earth to own the death of WCW, go out and buy that one, because that's going to be a better in-depth documentary. This one, honestly, it goes into things like Magnum Ta and his accident, because of the fact that I think Magnum Ta was supposed to be the main event against Ric Flair in the '87 Chi-Town Heat show, and was replaced by Ronnie Garvin, but I'm not 100% sure if that's the right year for that one. But Magnum Ta was going to be one of the biggest stars, and I guess that, if he was going to main event STARRCADE, and he didn't get in that accident, that would have changed the history of STARRCADE. But just too many of the stories are included on that Death of WCW DVD. That's the one you need to pick up. So I'm glad STARRCADE's coming back. I hope it is what it is. We'll have to see what goes down November 25th, live from Greensboro Coliseum.